full screen. Wonderful. So tonight, Nathan and I are going to talk about the early pioneer families of Spencer County, specifically the McGee family. They were from Waterford, and man, are they a colorful family. So I'm excited to talk to you about the McGee family. So Patrick McGee, he was in the Revolutionary War. He served in the 3rd Regiment out of Pennsylvania, and they soon recruited him for the flying camp, which in the Revolutionary War, they didn't have airplanes. So I was like, what in the world could a flying camp be in the Revolutionary War? Well, evidently something was very similar to this in France, and it just meant they would stay ready. And if something was going down, boom, they would hurry up and get to that point. So they didn't have an actual location to be at to fight. They stood on the ready to go where they needed to go. So then they fly into action. So he was recruited into this flying camp. And after the war, he came here to Spencer County. And there was a battle. A lot of you probably know about this battle in Kentucky called the Battle of Blue Licks. And this is a battle that the Kentuckians, well, that our country lost. And then George Rogers Clark said, every able-bodied man here in the Louisville area, we need you, we're going, and we're going to fight back. And so Patrick and his brother John signed up under William Harrod. You see his name highlighted over there. And they took off with George Rogers Clark and went to retaliate for what happened at Blue Licks. Because of his service in the Revolutionary War, he got 1,400 acres of land. Our country was not able to pay their soldiers, but we were very rich in land. So they were able to get land, and Spencer County was designated as a place for veterans to come after the war. So that's why so many veterans moved here to the Spencer County area, was because it was designated as a good place for land. So Patrick and John came here to Spencer County to get their land. Once Patrick and his brother John got here, Patrick married Rachel Froman. John married Rachel's sister, Elizabeth Froman. And they started a couple of things. They started a salt business because there was no refrigeration. They had to pack all of their meats in salt, so salt was extremely important. So they had knowledge of how to make a salt lick or how to produce salt. And they also built a ferry service that went across the Salt River. They had a tavern, and that's a very important part of a story we've got coming up in a little bit. So Patrick McGee left behind a rich legacy and a family that has a strong work ethic, that they're still here in Spencer County today, and the legacy that he left in his land and in the people is just wonderful to see. So I can talk a little bit about the family tree. So Patrick McGee Sr., if some of you guys remember when Don Carlin came, he talked about his family. The Carlin family left Scotland. They went to Ireland. They were on the Ulster plantation. They were persecuted and left for religious reasons and sailed across. Same thing with the McGee family. So they left Scotland, went to Ireland, were on the Ulster plantation, fled because of religious purposes, and came over here to the United States and settled in the same area. They were in York County, Pennsylvania. So it must have been something that a lot of families were going the same route. Once Patrick McGee Sr. Settled in York County, they had 5 sons and 3 daughters. The 5 sons is what we kind of concentrated on. All 5 of them fought in the Revolutionary War. James was afflicted with white swelling. Nobody knows what that is. It could have been like diabetes, because with diabetes you swell up. But that's not one, like some diseases with old-time names have been, we know what they are today. The white swelling is not one we know. But Thomas came here to the Spencer County area. He surveyed land and saw how great this place was, went back up the Ohio River, got his brothers, and they all came down here to settle together. On the way back, he was killed by Indians. And John and Patrick, when you got land, at first you got a land patent, and you had to perfect that patent, like by building a certain size house and putting in so many crops. So John and Patrick did that for Thomas. So Thomas still technically claimed his land, but John and Patrick did it in his name.
His land was on Shears Creek, I believe. And he willed it to some of his relatives when he died.
So Nathan is very familiar with the Waterford area and so familiar with all this land. And when he starts talking, man, everybody starts listening because he's got firsthand knowledge of all this. So it's.
And actually, one of the cabins that Patrick built still exists because he operated up and down the Salt River. I believe they come down from Harrodsburg ultimately, but he was exploring the Salt River Valley in 1778, and I think that's when he first got his eye on that land that he eventually went to, because he was exploring with a man with the last name of Simpson and a man with the last name of Pittenger. I believe it was Samuel, yes, that's right. There's Pittenger still here and buried at Elk Creek. But anyway, when they came to Simpson's Creek, he said, let's name it for you, Simpson. And he named it for his friend Simpson. And so then the land that this cemetery is on now is not far from, and it's really the first, if you're coming from Simpson's Creek, it's the first nice big bottom. And so I think he kind of put his eye on that land and then circled back around. But he ultimately, originally had settled around Shepherdsville. And he was part of the, associated with Brashear Station. And it had several different names, but there's a sign for Brashear Station at KOA. His land was on the other side, where Amazon is now, on Cedar Grove Road.
That seems so far away.
That's where they were. And the way he backtracked, so yes, it was kind of far away, but the way that he kind of skipped back was where he was tied in with the Fromans. The Fromans had 2 stations. They had a station initially, you see, so I think everybody kind of thinks that when the Revolutionary War ended, it was all done, but we still had the Northwest Indian War. So throughout that Northwest Indian War that would take until 1795, everybody was still pretty held up in stations. And so he kind of skipped from Brashears to another Froman station to the last Froman station, which that's where the John McGee Cemetery is, and that's in the Cox's Creek area. And then he'd come up to where he ended up. But when he had his tavern and his ferry, that was down at the Shepherdsville location. And he ended up selling that to Ben Pope, and the Pope family stayed down there. And there's actually a Pope cemetery, and he sold another tract of his land to the Troutmans. So the Troutmans of Shepherdsville bought land for Patrick McGee. And he had a lot of land. He also owned land, and that's another thing that kind of circles back around. All these families in this bottom, through the generations, still owned other tracts of land up in northern Kentucky. Like Patrick owned land in Gallatin County. And the Humes owned land in Trimble County, even when they moved back down here. And so a lot of these, as we'll go on, you'll notice a lot of the women will marry men from like Shelby County and Trimble County, and it's because they still had farms up there, and they were still going back and forth. But anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't do that.
Oh, please.
I'm curious.
Yes.
So what is considered a station? What does that mean?
Oh.
It's like a fort, but it's usually like cabins strung together with palisade. So everybody kind of holds up together, you know. And the reason they were working their way over to Shepherdsville is because that's where the best salt lick was Bullett's Lick. And so they really needed salt for preservation purposes, and it was a valuable commodity and all that. Everybody was traveling by water then. Like, you know, you hear about the Cumberland Gap and Wilderness Road and all that. That didn't really come about till the 1790s as a major thoroughfare. The earlier time, 1770s and 80s, it was all water-based. And so they were working their way up the Salt River trying to find the best places to make salt. It was like you stake your claim and that's where you're, you know, and they were, anyway, he was really involved in that, and so then they would ford up there, and apparently he was making pretty good. He was an industrious man, and so was Enoch, and Enoch especially stuff. But he got really into the salt making to where there was George Rogers Clark was kind of like he was the military dictator in like 1782, essentially. I don't know that he actually had that title technically, but he had ultimate command and control of everybody. And you were required to go to Louisville and work on the fortifications if you lived in the area. And Patrick McGee actually got in trouble because he said that he wasn't going to go, because he wanted to stay and make salt and make money, and he didn't want to go dig. He did go fight, but he didn't want to go dig and do that. He'd be rather doing his own thing. And so he was independent and very industrious for sure. And did a lot of wheeling and dealing, and so did his son Enoch on trading land, and the Fromans is a big part of it too. So Paul Froman, and that'll come up more too. Everybody a lot of people in this valley, the Christ family, the Rouse family, they were all what had been Palatine German families. So they came over from Germany in like 1709, 1710, and they had come down in the Shenandoah Valley first. And they were the earliest settlers in the Shenandoah Valley. And then later on they linked up with some of these other people, McGee and things in like West Virginia, Pennsylvania area, and came down the Ohio River. But Paul Froman, who several of McGee's married Fromans, and several of the Christ tie in too to all this. And the Christs have Froman roots too. So Paul Froman, he took out a lot of patents and had a lot of land dealings as well. And he developed a station in the Cox's Creek area. So that's another way that we roll into land and families. Anyway.
So a station is basically
Oh,
like
sorry, I
a
got lost on the
gated
station.
community. It's like a gated community. But back then, we were invading Native American
Right.
land.
Yeah.
This was their land, and so we were coming in unwelcome, and they wanted us out. And so in order to be safe, we kind of lived in what would be considered a
I did get way off the station topic,
fenced
didn't I?
in
That's okay, I don't
community.
know.
So John and Patrick were very close, and they married Froman sisters. And so John and Elizabeth Froman moved over into Nelson County to be closer to the Froman station. But Patrick was still very close, and you can see a picture of the stone house or stone castle that Patrick built his brother John, because he was an accomplished stonemason. So Patsy McGee, a lot of us know her. She was into cemetery restoration way before we were. In the 1990s, she restored the John McGee Cemetery over in Nelson County. And she contacted the newspaper and said, hey, I want to do the Patrick McGee Cemetery next. Who's up for it? Well, a couple decades late, I said, me. But I still contacted her, and she still helped with everything. Before the during some of the cleanups, her whole family came. So this is Jimmy McGee and Patsy McGee. The week of the cemetery dedication, Jimmy passed away. So keep her in your thoughts and prayers, because we really, really love Patsy, and we're sad that she's lost Jimmy. So this is the land that Patrick settled on, and that's where his cemetery is. And you can see that this land has not changed a lot in 200 years. It still looks exactly the same. And when you're out there in the cemetery, you feel like you've stepped back into time 200 years as well. So this is Enoch and Rebecca. A lot of you guys know this stone from the cemetery, but it's really nice to put a picture with them. We've discovered a picture of Rebecca and Enoch. So this is a son of Patrick McGee. Patrick and Rachel Froman had 13 kids. I just can't even imagine what 13 kids would feel like. So Enoch married Rebecca Christ, and I'll show you a little bit about the family tree. So you can see here where Patrick married Rachel Froman. Patrick was in the Revolutionary War, and his father, also named Patrick, was in the Revolutionary War. Rachel's father was Paul Froman, and he was in the Revolutionary War. And then they had Enoch. Enoch married Rebecca Christ. Her father, Jacob Christ, was in the War of 1812. And then he married Rojanea, and I never know how to say that. If anybody knows how to say that,
I can't decide either.
I usually say
Regina.
Roger now, but I don't.
Rojanea? Yeah, it's a hard one, but
Regina.
it's beautiful.
Now,
So-
just one, for Jacob's father was Nicholas Christ, and he was in the Revolutionary War. And I really think there's a possibility he's buried in the cemetery.
Really?
Because he's in the same area, and he died in 1822. I really think Jacob might be buried in the cemetery too.
Oh my gosh, so we've had so much fun figuring out who's in the cemetery because there are so many records and there are so many unmarked graves. Well, they're marked, but they're marked with field stones, so they don't have the name. So we've been trying to puzzle through who's in the family. This is a really neat connection because Rebecca Christ's parents had Sarah Christ. And you might know Sarah and Reuben if you've been in the cemetery. There are 4 stones right together. Angeline Collins, she was recently in one of the Back Trails issues. And then William Edmondson, her husband, we just recently, the Historical Society purchased a lot of brass markers. I think I have a picture here.
I actually have the service record. David found this. And he was right.
Ooh,
Yeah.
go ahead, show that.
I will say, I'm trying to figure this all out because, so here's the service record.
Very nice.
And it says Spencer County and all that. And I've cross-referenced, and it gives his age. He was 45 years old. And I've cross-referenced, and yeah, it's for sure him. There's no other possible candidate in the census for it to be Edmondson 45 and all that. But the odd thing is, number one, he was in the 12th, it says he's in the 12th Kentucky Cavalry, but see, this is a Union POW record, he could have told them whatever. And 12th Kentucky was a Western Kentucky unit. It doesn't make sense that he'd be in that unit necessarily, but he could have went to Western Kentucky.
We got them all over like that.
Definitely. But the thing that I'm hung up on is December 24th of 1864, there was no organized Confederates in Kentucky. At that
Bowling
time,
Green, there was a group called Bowling Green.
well, not in 1864, because at that time, they had just lost the Battle of Nashville. So, John Hunt Morgan was dead, Forrest was retreating into Alabama. And this is a Forrest unit. And so, he was behind enemy lines, so to say.
More like gorillas.
And yes, potentially was a guerrilla is what I'm trying to get at. And I do think that these people were supporting guerrillas because Edgar Erskine says that both sides of his family were thoroughly Confederate. And he says that Enoch spent a lot of his money supporting Confederate soldiers, and that Enoch actually was captured by the Union, but they released him because he was so old. But anyway, back to specifically on William Edmondson, the thing that I'm hung up on, the other thing I'm hung up on, is he gave this oath on May 16th, 1865. I do believe this is him. His stone says he dies April 7th, 1865, over a month before when
Oh my
he
goodness.
gave this oath. So the stone's probably wrong, but I don't. I still don't understand why, you know? But anyway, sorry.
You can't always trust what
No.
the stone says.
Isn't that?
Frequently, tombstones are put up months or years after the burial.
And you think written in stone, it's reliable, but not always.
Also, he was Max Rouse's grandfather. His daughter was Kate Edmondson, who married John Taylor Rouse, and they're Max Rouse's parents. So Max Rouse Road's right on the other side of it. And his house still stands. It's like a blue-gray color. It's close to Scott's house.
This is interesting. So Enoch and Rebecca had a daughter who married a Hume. And I think, Nathan, you could take this.
Yeah,
this one
okay.
on the
So,
news.
yeah, Reverend Lewis Hume, gosh, I've really got into the Hume family. Lemira and Lewis, he was from Trimble County, but he'd come there, it was kind of interesting how he got there. His father, his name was Charles, he'd gone bankrupt. They lived in Northern Virginia in Fauquier County, and they had roots in Culpeper next door, but Northern Virginia area. And Charles had gone bankrupt, and because he had signed a bond, like he had co-signed for somebody else that went bankrupt, and that's why he then went bankrupt. And he came to Kentucky to try to fix his fortunes, and he eventually did. Anyway, Reverend Lewis was, and I got a picture of him too that I can show. He was described by, so he had a grandson, Edgar Erskine Hume, who has wrote a bunch about the family, and he went backwards and forwards on it, and he says that Reverend Lewis, and this is also where I get into the kind of the quasi-paramilitary guerrilla type thing, because he says in some articles he calls him a Confederate chaplain, but in other articles he's pretty clear that no, he just was a reverend that really supported the Confederacy. He never officially joined or anything. But gosh, I'm getting my things lost. His grandfather, Lewis Hume's grandfather, was an original member of the Order of Cincinnati. And his great-grandfather had been a Jacobite, and they were actually nobility. He was a laird, they have a castle, all that. His great-grandfather was a surveyor who taught George Washington how to survey. Like George Washington was his assistant and such. Lewis married Lamira like 10 years before Dr. Joseph and Sarah got married. So there's that. I don't know.
Well, the Humes were originally buried with
they got
Patrick
moved.
McGee
Yeah.
Cemetery, but their grandson, Edgar Erskine, who wrote this book,
Yeah.
by then, he was working for the governor. He was the doctor, the personal doctor for the governor. And so they asked him to, they reserved a spot in the Frankfurt Cemetery for him. And he said, I won't be buried there unless my whole family's buried there. And they said, well, fine, then we'll go dig them up from the McGee Cemetery and we'll bring them to the Frankfurt Cemetery. So we took off for the Frankfurt Cemetery expecting to find headstones that would have been in the McGee Cemetery. Can't find the headstones anywhere. They're in unmarked graves there in Frankfurt, which is kind of disappointing because they were big time people. And then come to find out, Edgar Erskine is not even buried there. He's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. So they moved his family so that they could all be together, and now he's in Arlington National Cemetery. But they were very important people.
Yeah, so the son, I got my notes here. The son, Lewis Hume's son, Enoch Edgar, and that's who you're talking about, who was moved to Frankfurt. He was a doctor, and he was a pretty renowned doctor. He had studied under, he actually had a lot of schooling, but he, particularly, he studied at U of L under these kind of notorious, famous, doctors named Dr. Yandell. And if you're ever at Cave Hill, they're buried like downhill from the National Cemetery. They have a nice big thing. But anyway, he studied at U of L, and then he studied actually at Bellevue Hospital in New York City, the Bellevue College. And came back, and he was a doctor in Anderson County for a while. And then he became a doctor at Frankfurt, and he had a doctor's office in the Capitol Hotel at Frankfurt. And he married a woman from a real prestigious political family called the Souths. And he built a mansion. It was called the Magnolias.
Yes.
And the steps of Enoch's mansion still stand, but the mansion's burned down. But Enoch was the personal doctor of William Goebbels, who's the man that was assassinated. He's our governor that was assassinated. He was elected. There was some back and forth over if it was a fair election, and some people decided it wasn't fair, and they shot and killed him. And and they took him to Enoch Edgar Hume to be cared for. And like you said, his son, Edgar Erskine, who has compiled so much data about the family way back into Scotland and all the nobility and all that, and backwards and forwards, he served in 3 wars, World War I through Korea, and on some other appointments in between the major wars. And when he retired, he was the highest, most decorated medical officer. He was a major general, and he was the most decorated medical officer in U.S. history when he retired.
All right, so this is what Nathan was referring to earlier. Patrick McGee was a very notorious, colorful man, and this is the first time we see him. Okay, what do I do? This one might be a hard one. We've lost the Wi-Fi signal, that's why it's, well, why don't you go ahead and start talking about it, and then when it comes back up, I'll work on it while you're talking.
I had a random thought that's not about that, but it's about Enoch. But what are we talking about?
The treasonable.
Oh, yeah, I like that. I like that. Well, Enoch was also kind of hard-headed, because something I've come across lately, him and my ancestor Tom Rouse and my ancestor's brother James Rouse, and I know James and Tom were pro-Confederate. After the Civil War, they refused to pay their federal taxes, and they actually got taken to federal court. Enoch did too. Enoch and the Rouses got taken to federal court for refusing to pay their taxes, which he must have caught up on eventually, because I can't find that he lost any of his property. But he was being a little hard-headed there after the war for a minute, and he definitely had the resources. He took a hit on the war, but in 1870 he was still doing pretty good. And his ag censuses are, he had a really diverse farm. Didn't raise any tobacco, but raised pretty diverse on the grains, but really diverse on the stock he had. He had probably the largest dairy herd in Spencer County at his time, which was like 20 head. It wasn't crazy, but he was way out on horses and on his stock. And it was the diversity of it too. He did not have all his eggs in one basket. He clearly was being really industrious.
Did he have pigs and sheep?
Oh yeah, they had all, like, I can't remember exactly how it broke down, and he switched. I do know, I'm trying to remember, I'm thinking 1860 he had a lot more pigs, and then he got rid of the pigs. He didn't have as many pigs in 1870. But he had quite a mix. And the dairy really stuck out to me, because if you look at like his neighbors, they'll have like 3 or 5 dairy. He had, I think 20 on the 1870, or pushing 20.
That's about the same proportions when the greens went from pigs to cattle.
Oh, yeah.
How about crops?
Well, they were raising corn. He raised a lot of corn. And then there was other grains too. I'm trying to remember now. I do remember that I want to say the corn was like 750 bushels. So for the time, putting out a decent amount of corn. And then they all raised like garden plots. Like they'll even put down like how many potatoes and sweet potatoes. And it's clearly just a garden plot because it's like 20 bushels or something. But it's really detailed. I love the ag census.
Yeah.
So this newspaper article that I'm trying to bring up here talks about Patrick McGee, because John Rogers Clark said everybody's got to come down to Louisville and put in some time to make sure that we're all safe. Well, Patrick McGee said, I'm not doing that, and before I would go to work in the falls, I would black myself and go to the Indians. They put out
Like a warrant.
yes, a warrant
Yeah.
for him. They wanted to take him to court for these treasonable words. And he said, although Patrick McGee seems to have been a man of peace, he disliked this duty.
And supposedly he said this at Froman Station, but I believe there was 2 Froman stations. The one we're more familiar with, where the Stone Castle is, it's down in Cox's Creek, off of Samuel's Loop, right off of 509 down there. Am I right about that? It's close to Cox's Creek Elementary School. I've not actually been, but the Froman Station, I believe he said that at, though, was an earlier station that they had that was up on like Cedar Grove Road area. So a little bit closer to where his original.
It's back.
There you go.
Yes!
Oh, that
Oh, back up. I don't know what you're doing. Don't touch
Not,
it.
don't hold my mouth like this. So you can see he was ordered to pay a fine of 400 pounds of tobacco for these treasonable utterances.
It's bouncing back and forth.
So the next story is a grandson of Enoch McGee, and his name was John McGee. He worked at the Teacup when it was a garage.
Wow.
And he went to get a pint of beer at the local tavern, and they had changed the price during the day, and the price was 1 more cent than it usually was. But he only brought enough to get that 1 pint. And so he and this Ralph Taylor got into a fight. And Ralph Taylor hit him over the head. And so later in the evening, John McGee's wearing this bandage, and he's out in the middle of the town square, and Ralph Taylor comes with a gun, shoots 3 times, misses them all 3 times, so John McGee lights up a cigarette, and with the bandage on his head, lights up a cigarette. Ralph Taylor spins the cylinder on his gun and shoots for a 4th time and kills him.
Wow.
So the McGees were not only not afraid of terrible utterances, but they weren't afraid of death either. And then this story, oh, this is a good story. I hope it stays up. So Waterford has always had a great reputation for being a wonderful town. And this was my favorite thing I've ever found about Waterford. So this granddaughter of an Alloway tells a story about how her grandfather used to call Waterford Wasm. And it's because at the tavern there was a bar that had an entrance and an exit all on the same line. And after they drink at the tavern, they would hang geese, from the barn upside down and grease the necks of these geese. And they'd get on their horse and gallop as fast as they could, and the first person to grab a hold of a goose and pull the head off would win the game of Wasm, and people would come from all over the place to play and watch this game of Wasm, and they almost named Waterford Wasm. So thank goodness we don't still play this game, and I hope it's a tradition we never bring back.
Merritt Alloway was also a Confederate soldier. He was the one that I was talking about. So he was in the 1st Kentucky Cavalry. There was several people from Spencer County in the 1st Kentucky Cavalry. And at the end of the Civil War, when Jefferson Davis was fleeing Richmond, when he got down into the Carolinas, some Kentucky cavalrymen were his last escort. And once he got down into Georgia and realized that his goose was cooked, he released his escort, and they surrendered and were paroled, and then he was captured the next day. And one of the men that was paroled, it was in Washington, Georgia, it was like May the 11th, 65. One of the men that was paroled was Merritt Alloway. So he was one of Jeff Davis's last bodyguards.
They say in this newspaper article that the barn is still standing on the Alloway farm.
Oh.
Does anybody know that barn? Because in this nutpaper in '83, I think it was published, they said the barn's still standing. I'd love to go see the barn.
Joellen
You know,
might
the
go.
house.
It's the one that-
Alloway Farm is what
The
that said.
house.
The barn's still behind along the road. If you pay attention, it's on that right-hand side.
No
Oh, is that the
kidding?
one that's right up against the road there?
Yeah.
That is the Alloway property.
That's the
Oh,
Alloway
I think we
property.
need to take a field trip.
So when you're on the hairpin at the bottom of the hill, and then there's one on the right, yeah.
Precinct.
And
Oh,
the
wait,
barn,
the
the barn's
dairy
built like
farm?
a normal
Right.
tobacco barn with it being open doors on each end.
Oh.
I know right where that is.
Well, and on the map, that's where you are, because there's Alloway there. And like, this is where Anthony's house is, over here. Or right there, right at the AJ Maddox.
Is it William?
Yeah, turn this around so everybody can see.
Yeah, so the Alloway property, I'll try to center this. So this right here is where the McGee Cemetery is. And then if anybody knows Anthony Travis's house, it's the one marked AJ Maddox here. And if you see Alloway is right over here. See?
Crazy how things haven't changed much.
Yeah.
Our town, Taylorsville, has been celebrating Patrick McGee a lot recently. He's got a banner in downtown Taylorsville honoring him. In the parade, we had descendants come from all over the place. We had some come from Kansas City, Kansas, John McGee, and his brothers, Patrick, Thomas, and Robert, so all named after the Revolutionary War soldiers. And they are alive right now, so I thought it was so fitting that for our 250th anniversary celebration that the four brothers named after the Revolutionary War soldiers were able to come. And then anybody who knows Gary Mann, he's has been a Spencer County staple for many, many years. He has a twin brother,
Mike.
Barry, and is Mike the twin brother? I thought Barry.
I think Mike's the one brother.
And then,
Could be wrong.
so there's three brothers, two are twins and one's a brother. They are descendants.
Mike was my dad's boss, so I'm pretty sure Mike's the other
twin?
twin. Yeah.
And then, of course, Patsy McGee from Nelson County. So they were all in the parade as descendants of Patrick McGee. And then this is the big thing that happened today. So America 250, Spencer County America 250 got an anonymous donation from somebody you guys all know very well. And he purchased this memorial, I'm going to cry. He purchased this memorial that is now standing in downtown Taylorsville and has the names of all 67 Revolutionary War soldiers that moved here after the war. And we are just thrilled. That's 2 years worth of research, getting all those names. The list up until 2 years ago had only 13 people, 13 Revolutionary War soldiers, and the reason we found out it wasn't correct was Phoebe's ancestor was always listed as Brian Stone. And I'm like, there's no Brian Stone that ever lived in Spencer County, but there was a Bryant Sloan. So every list kept copying and pasting, copy and paste. And so we thought, well, if that is an error, then we need to do our research and start over and come up with a list. And we just kept coming up with names. And there's not 13, there's 67. And now we've got correct spellings as much as we can.
This deserves a hand.
But it was amazing to do the research and come up with these names. Since then, David has found 2 more Revolutionary War soldiers. So we've got an update. It just was installed today and we've already got an update.
And another maybe.
There's a debate on, well, I haven't actually ever found a record for it, but a lot, you see a lot of things online and then you don't know if it's real, obviously, especially with genealogy. But people say that Zebulon Collins served too, so he would be missing. But I've never found a hard record.
And that's the hard part. We've got a lot of people that have said, well, my great-great-great-great-grandfather served, and we didn't just go on talk or tradition. We found 3 primary source documents. So there were times where I flew out to Salt Lake City or went to Washington, D.C. to find these primary source documents. So any name that's up there had 3 primary source documents that we were able to find. So there's still more that we're trying to find those documents for, and we would love to find those documents, but these are the ones where we have the proof.
Who are the people in the photo?
Oh, so this is Donnie Bentley. He's the monument man from Mount Washington. So
Mount
he's-
Eden.
Mount Eden, what I said. He's from Mount Eden. And we ordered the monument from him almost a year and a half ago. The monument got stalled in the Strait of Hormuz. So it was supposed to be installed for July 4th, but it was still in the Strait of Hormuz on July 4th. So we're happy to finally have it. This is Scott Travis, our judge executive, Spencer County's judge executive. And then this is me and Bonnie Downs, who's also a member of the Historical Society. And we're going to tour her house next month. But she's part of the America 250 committee, along with Robbie Travis, who's Scott's wife, and Vicki Yates Glisson, who's she's currently restoring a historic house here in Spencer County. So we've got 4 America 250 committee members, but we're small, but we're mighty. Nathan, do you have more things you want to talk about, or anybody have any questions?
Danny's an Abraham Pittenger descendant, so that's cool.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, your ancestors up there.
I didn't even know.
And then also where you had your fife program, I believe Reeser was a fifer.
He was a fifer as well
She
as
was.
Benjamin Harrison Carrick here.
Yeah,
He
he
was a
was.
fifer, so we've got the two fifers.
And does Reeser's house still stand?
He's buried out in Little Mount
No,
No,
Cemetery.
his house doesn't stand anymore.
But it's
Okay.
pretty close to where
But it
the
did up
Little Mount
until
It's
Baptist-
near,
several decades
it's
ago.
near some of my wife's family with the Allens and like, so yes, his house doesn't stand anymore.
You know, the Froman name, we've had a drugstore named.
Yeah.
And do you know the connection with this Froman family?
We think that they are descendants of Paul Froman, but the really fun story of that is when it got down to the pharmacy, the father left the pharmacy in a will to the son that said, you're not allowed to get married if you want the pharmacy business. And so that was all very scandalous because they had children. And they weren't married. So the family doesn't want to talk about their ancestors because back in that time, it was very scandalous to not be married, but he wanted the pharmacy business.
A funny story recently about the Froman pharmacy. Of course, Tim bought out Froman's and then moved it to the new part of town. And then had this humongous sign up there, Froman's, and so we all assumed that was an old sign. He said, no, I may have that made.
And it looked old.
They did, I thought it was.
I think John Hamilton took that sign home to put in the
okay.
museum, so he has that sign.
I will say one thing that I had gotten, or had been curious about was there's foremans on Lily Pike and like they're the foreman cabin across from Lily Pike. And I sometimes even, like I have an article here where somebody's talking about a foreman and it's printed as Froman
Yeah.
and they meant a foreman. And so I was curious if there was crossover, and there's not. The foremans are, sorry. Actually, I enjoyed this.
So there's foremans and fromans, and they were
We're
not
down at the-
mixed. Like Beard and Baird, they are from the same family. And that was a hard connection to find, because you'll see Alexander Beard, he's a descendant, or a Revolutionary War soldier, and his descendant is Bland Baird. So their name changed, and you find that a lot as you go down through the generations, how the names change. But yeah, Froman and Foreman aren't.
Yeah, they're not, and I thought they might be. And you said about the beards, like sometimes you'll see Beard, B-A-I-R-D.
Yes.
And then sometimes they are related. And, yeah, so.
Any other questions? Well, Nathan, I was just so honored to do this with
Yeah.
you. You're so knowledgeable about the area and so knowledgeable about the McGee family. I'm so glad you were able to share all of your knowledge with us tonight.
Well, thanks. I'm glad I was able to do it too. And I've been coming for about a year now to things, and the first one I came to was the McGee cleanup. So, and I wish I could come to more things, but I'm busy, you know. But Terri does such a great job with the cemeteries and stuff. So I appreciate your dedication to everything.
Well, we are happy to have you. We'll take you anytime, any way we can get you.
I'm kind of interested in the stump grinding thing.
Ooh.
I think I could run a stump grinder. Sign him up.
Thank you both so much, and we've got, Terri, after all these years, I don't think, have we ever given you a mug?
I've never got my own mug.
Well, it's about time.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy
Appreciate it.
drinking coffee and thinking of us. Let's give them another round of applause.
Get yours out, let's do cheers.
Stick around as long as you like and ask more questions if you like.
Here's to the Historical Society. Let's do it again, Nathan.
Picture.
Do it again. Cheers. Thank you.
Hey, I looked up white smoke.
Oh, what is it?
Ooh, yeah.
It says, during the Revolutionary War era, white smoke